Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Yang Berusaha Mr. Herizal Hazri, Chief Executive ISIS Malaysia, His Excellency Takahashi Katsuhiko, Ambassador of Japan to Malaysia, Mr. Satoru Kumagai, Director, Economic Geography Studies Group, Institute of Development Economics, Japan External Trade Organization, ISIS board members, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the 40th anniversary of the Look East policy, a conversation with Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad. This webinar is a collaboration between ISIS Malaysia and Japanese Embassy in Malaysia. The session will consist of a keynote address by Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad, a short 5-minute discussion by Mr. Satoru Kumagai, followed by the question and answer session. Without further ado, we are pleased to invite Yang Berusaha Mr. Herizal Hazri, Chief Executive of ISIS Malaysia, to deliver his welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Fadlina. Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. Takahashi Katsuhiko, Ambassador of Japan to Malaysia, Mr. Kumagai Satoru, Director of Economic Geography Studies Group at the Institute of Developing Economies of the Japan External Trade Organization, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, selamat pagi, and ohayo gozaimasu. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on the Look East policy and its 40th anniversary. It has become somewhat of a cliche to say that one's distinguished speaker needs no introduction. Well, today's speaker truly needs none. As we all know, Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad is synonymous with Malaysia's industrialization and development. Life story and political career have been the stuff of legend. His vision for Malaysia has been as profound as it is game-changing. 40 years ago, Tun Dr Mahathir launched the Look East policy. It has become known as one of Tun's signature policy programs. The Look East policy has had an enduring impact on Malaysia, as well as on Malaysia-Japan's relations. Inspired by the Japanese work ethic, Tun Dr Mahathir sought to emulate and adapt the Japanese model at home as a path for Malaysia to follow in its quest to become a developed nation. This called for a profound change in the mindset. Under the leadership of Tun Dr Mahathir and his successors, Japan has remained one of Malaysia's most important partners for almost half a century and counting. It is an honor to have him with us today to deliver the opening keynote address. It's also my pleasure to welcome Mr. Kumagai Satoru as a discussant in today's webinar. His long-standing research has been on issues in the international trade and economic development in East Asia, specifically focused on the Malaysian economy and the middle income trap. I look forward to his thoughts on the Look East policy and prospects of elevating Malaysia-Japan cooperation. Distinguished guests, over the decades, ISIS Malaysia has worked in close partnership with Japanese agencies, institutions, and experts under the guidance of the Look East policy. We held a biannual dialogue with Japanese counterparts through the Malaysia-Japan colloquium, much of the 1980s, 1990s. With the support from the Japan Business Federation, the Embassy of Japan in Malaysia, the Japanese Chamber of Trade and Industry, Malaysia, as well as the Japan Foundation, Malaysia also established the Center for Japan Studies from 1991 to 2002. This center hosted several programs including lecture series, research publications, conferences, and others as part of its activities, and was the leading platform for Malaysia-Japan Track 2 engagement. Hosted some seminal and leading think tankers from Japan during its stay, including former Foreign Minister Mr. Okita Saburo, former Prime Minister Mr. Kaifu Toshiki, and the founder of Sony Corporation Mr. Morita Aki. Additionally, support from the Japanese Embassy contributed greatly to our signature conference, the Asia Pacific Roundtable, better known as the APR, which will host its 35th edition this July. Ladies and gentlemen, the Look East policy has served us well in the past, and I'm confident it will continue to drive Malaysia-Japan partnership to greater heights. While we look back on the accomplishments of the past 40 years, let us also take this opportunity to reinvigorate Malaysia-Japan ties, to pursue more research, to deepen cooperation, and re-establish close contact. To this end, I'm happy to have the opportunity to collaborate with the Japanese Embassy in organizing this auspicious event. It's my sincere hope that the insights we will get from today's discussion will lead to an inspiration for greater engagements and initiatives, as well as an impetus for further growth. Domo arigatou gozaimasu and gambarimasu. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herizal Hazri, for the welcoming remarks. Now, we will be most honored to have His Excellency Takahashi Katsuhiko, Ambassador of Japan to Malaysia, to deliver the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. His Excellency Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mr. Herizal Hazri, Chief Executive of the ISIS Malaysia, Mr. Kumagai Satoru, Director of Economic Geography Studies Group at IDE JETRO, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to participate in this significant webinar that marks the celebration of the 40th anniversary of the Look-East Policy, or LEP. I am especially delighted to welcome the presence of His Excellency Tun Dr Mahathir, the institutor of the policy, in joining us today. Serving as the Ambassador of Japan to Malaysia in conjunction with the 40th anniversary of the LEP is a unique and meaningful opportunity for me. As I started my tenure here last November, I thought it would be one of my major missions to make the coming year a successful milestone in the history of the friendly relationship between Japan and Malaysia. Since 1982, more than 26,000 Malaysians have studied or received their trainings in Japan under the LEP. Even during my stay in Malaysia less than half a year, I have come across numerous occasions that demonstrate the importance of LEP in developing Malaysia and connecting the two countries by trust. The embassy recently produced a brochure featuring the anniversary in both printed and soft copy formats. The soft copy is available at the embassy's website, and I hope you to have a look at the brochure. I am sure that you'll be impressed by the dedications of the LEP alumni in contributing to the Malaysian society by leveraging on their knowledge and skills that they learned in Japan. Ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed the changes in the situation surrounding the two countries and the international circumstances over the past 40 years. These changes, of course, have impacts on Japan-Malaysia relations. This anniversary year is a great opportunity for us to discuss in what context we should reposition the LEP after 40 years, so that we can further strengthen the bilateral relationship between Japan and Malaysia for the years to come. I believe that LEP will remain relevant as it has always been, but specific programs under the policy should be updated in light of the changes in the global and social circumstances. In relation to that, I wish to briefly propose 4 aspects that may be interesting to consider in order to update the LEP. First, I would like to propose giving a greater focus on the recovery from COVID-19. Malaysia is in the transition into the endemic phase, and economic revival remains a key concern. Japan may be able to work with the Malaysians in the new technology areas, such as digital and green. These new technologies are needed to tackle global challenges such as environment and climate change, and it will bring about greater business opportunities. Second, we should deepen discussion on the areas with great potential of cooperation between the two countries. I propose focusing on the mutual challenges that Malaysia is currently facing and Japan has some advantages on, such as disaster risk reduction, water resources management, and aging society. I also believe that Japan and Malaysia can be partners in tackling peace and security issues like Ukraine, Afghanistan, Myanmar, North Korea, and the Middle East peace process. Third, Japan can learn a lot from Malaysia about managing its diversity, which is rapidly becoming a core social issue in Japan. It is encouraging to learn that Malaysia, as a moderate Muslim country with multiple ethnic groups coexist side by side, manages to achieve economic development and social stability to a large extent. Fourth, I also wish to see more Japanese people coming to further their studies in Malaysia and gaining greater exposure to the Malaysian culture. I believe that this will expand the significance of the LEP and its benefit will be sustained much longer. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I sincerely hope the LEP to continue toward its 50th and 60th anniversaries and to be further enhanced to underpin the Japan-Malaysia bilateral relationship that contributes to the development of both countries. The Embassy will continue to collaborate with various sectors, including the Malaysian government and the ISIS Malaysia, to conduct intensive discussion on our way forward. Thank you very much for your attention. Terima kasih. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We move this morning's event to the highlight of the session. With great honor, we are most pleased to invite Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad, former Prime Minister of Malaysia, to deliver his keynote address.
Firstly, a good morning to everyone. Mr. Herizal Hazri, Chief Executive, ISIS Malaysia, His Excellency Mr. Takahashi Katsuhiko, Ambassador of Japan to Malaysia, Mr. Satoru Kumagai, Director, Economic Geography Studies Group, Institute of Development Economics, the IDE JETRO, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure being able to participate in this event commemorating the 40th anniversary of the Look East policy. When I first introduced the policy in February 1982 at the 5th Joint Annual Conference of the Malaysia-Japan Economic Association, also known as Majeka Jamaica, little did I expect that I would be present to participate in its anniversary 4 decades later. It had indeed been a long journey with numerous trials and tribulations that was spiced by opinions from both critics and advocates. The policy had proven to be a success, and it should continue to be one of the foundations in our development strategies and programs. Ladies and gentlemen, I was always asked on why did I choose to look east and not west, a practice perceived to be the convention of Malaysia and my predecessors post-independence. By any measure, it would have been easier to look west given the colonial legacy that was pervasive in Malaysia, be it our administration, education, economic endeavors, and social conditioning. Our professionals and top administrators were Western trained and educated, making everything West a matter of familiarity, if not their ethos. As such, introducing the Look East policy went against the grain and the accepted norms. However, much as looking west would have been a natural progression for me as I was with my predecessors, I was, however, very much aware that the West was then sliding. Their industries were not as competitive due to work ethics and labor practices. They seem to suffer from a derailment from their progress, making them somewhat unappealing as model nations for an ambitious third world nation. Ladies and gentlemen, it was, however, different with the East, with Japan. It was an exciting period, as we had been then witnessed how Japan was like the proverbial rising phoenix. It was literally rising from the ashes of World War II, rebuilding from utter devastation and an economy that had been crippled and crumbled. Given its ability to rise from such destruction, surely Malaysia, which was not in such a tragic condition and in fact blessed with numerous natural resources, would be able to emulate such success. All Malaysia needed was a policy shift and adopt a nation or nations that could be used as models in charting its progress and economic pursuit. Apart from Japan's impressive growth and prowess in its development programs and industrialization, I was also taken up by its work ethics and national pride. Ladies and gentlemen, to my mind, brilliant policies and effective programs can only be fully realized and their objectives achieved if the executioners and support system have the right attitude and sense of responsibility. Apart from that, the sense of responsibility towards the organization the Japanese serve is evident and reflected in their selflessness when putting efforts to ensure that their organization prevail even at the expense of their own well-being. And most of all is the pride in their work. To them, failure to deliver and perform is something to be deeply ashamed of. That had made them perform well in their tasks as well as made them strive for perfection. With such attitude in everything they manufactured and produced, Japan is then associated with efficiency and quality, and it was only a matter of time they would overtake the West. Ladies and gentlemen, we decided that the best way to learn and emulate the Japanese work ethic is through education, making education the heart of the Look East policy. With the help of the Japanese government, we initiated programs to send students and government officials to Japan for further studies and training. When I left the office in 2003, there were more than 10,000 Malaysians sent to Japan under the Look East policy program. To date, the number has grown to over 26,000 Malaysians. I'm proud that this concept has been a success. Many of Malaysians sent to Japan have done tremendously well upon returning home. Yet, the number of Malaysians sent to Japan today is a far cry from what it used to be. I believe we can and should do better. Therefore, I hope there would be a more comprehensive approach towards education under the Look East policy and Malaysia-Japan relations as a whole. We should look at the Japanese education system starting at the preschool level to the university. Ladies and gentlemen, in the mid-1980s, in an effort to address the US ballooning trade deficits against Japan and Germany, an agreement was reached among the G5 countries known as the Plaza Accord in 1985. In essence, the agreement led to the appreciation of the Japanese yen, the endaka, as it is known in Japan. The appreciation of the yen made it more expensive for Japanese export-oriented manufacturers to produce goods domestically, and many were forced to relocate operations overseas. Malaysia saw the benefits of hosting the Japanese multinational corporations, or MNCs, especially in terms of employment creation, and we sought to capture the investment opportunities by highlighting the Look East policy as part of investment promotion missions to Japan. Many Japanese companies, including Matsushita, Mitsui, Toshiba, Mitsubishi, Eon, and Kao, have either relocated or expanded their production base in Malaysia. From 1986 to 1990, Malaysia saw a massive influx in Japanese FDI as well as double-digit growth in bilateral trade, pushing Japan to surpass the US as Malaysia's top economic partner. Today, there are close to 1,500 Japanese companies operating in Malaysia, employing over 400,000 Malaysians. The Look East policy has been instrumental to the industrialization effort of Malaysia and contributed greatly towards the economic development of Malaysia as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, 10 years ago, when the 30th anniversary of Look East policy was approaching, news emerged on reassessing and upgrading the Look East policy. The following year, leaders from both countries established a framework for the Look East policy 2.0 and subsequently a bilateral coordinating committee, or BCC, was formed. When I became Prime Minister for the second time, one of my key agenda was to ensure the revitalization of the Look East policy 2.0. Former Prime Minister Abe and I agreed that the framework of Look East policy 2.0 needed to widen and deepen the scope and areas of cooperation to incorporate new trends in bilateral cooperation to remain relevant. We had agreed to incorporate the elements of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, or 4IR, in new cooperative projects, including in agro-technology, automobile industry, disaster risk reduction, and the environment. The Look East Policy 2.0 program will include a special preparatory program, the Look East Policy 2.0 training program, and science and technology research partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, as we look towards the future, it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge the global pandemic that has ravished lives and livelihood, that has set back years of progress and development. And the Look East policy can be a convenient platform to chart new possibilities and opportunities in addressing these setbacks. Before I end my speech, I would like to thank ISIS Malaysia and the Embassy of Japan in Kuala Lumpur for giving me this opportunity to speak on the Look East policy. And I truly hope that the 40th anniversary would provide a new momentum to the Look East policy and Malaysia-Japan relations as a whole. I thank you.
Thank you, Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will be moving to the next section of this morning's program. Before passing the floor to our distinguished discussant, we wish to kindly invite our participants to share your questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We do look forward to your engagement. Now, we will be most grateful to have our discussant, Mr. Kumagai Satoru, Director, Economic Geography Studies Group, Institute of Development Economics, Japan External Trade Organization, to take the floor. Mr. Kumagai, the floor is yours.
First of all, I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak after three prominent personalities here today, and also express my highest respect to those who have devoted themselves to the Look East policy or the LEP in Malaysia and Japan. The most important aspect of the LEP is one country, Malaysia, officially declares another country, Japan, as a role model in economic development. Until the 1970s, a general anti-Japanese sentiment remains in most ASEAN countries on the memory of World War II. However, Tun Dr Mahathir launched the LEP in 1982, just 7 months after his inauguration. The LEP is a great relief to the Japanese cooperating or investing in Malaysia without fear of being accused of an economic invasion. In the survey of Japanese companies operating in Malaysia conducted by JETRO, one of the top 3 factors they appreciate in Malaysia is always political stability. But what exactly means political stability? Some countries under dictatorship may be also politically stable. Actually, political stability here means the Malaysian government is always business friendly and friendly to Japan. And that is a direct consequence of the LEP. Under the LEP, more than 15,000 Malaysians studied in Japan, having no small impact on the rapid industrialization of Malaysia. For Japanese friends, it is a great advantage that there are many people who land in Japan and understand the Japanese language, culture, work ethics, and diligence. Still, I would like to express a higher expectation of the LEP alumni. I would like to see more of them to be an MD or CEOs of Japanese companies operating in Malaysia. Of course, it is also an issue for Japanese side. Japanese companies are run by such different cultures and structures from other MNCs. So they should also transform themselves to be more open to non-Japanese. 40 years ago, Malaysia was a developing country while Japan was a rising developed country. The relationship is naturally like an elder brother and a younger brother. Today, Malaysia is a country about to enter the club of developed countries, as foretold by Wabasan Duapo. Then it will be soon become somewhat strange that one developed country learns from the other in one direction. Now, Japan also should learn from Malaysia. So the Look East policy should be rebranded to the Look Each Other policy. I would like the Japanese younger generation to learn the nature of a multicultural, multi-language, multi-ethnic society here in Malaysia. Also, I would like the Japanese young people growing up in the lost decades of Japan to learn a positive mindset from Malaysian people, the spirit of Japan Bole. The world may now be divided again by various wars, such as the US-China trade war, COVID-19, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In this newly divided world, Malaysia and Japan are essential partners, as both countries respect democracy and not free trade, but fair trade, and protect the environment and human rights. At the same time, Malaysia and Japan will be the best partners exactly because the two countries are very different. In the basic theory of international economics, the gains from trade come from differences. In other words, the two countries are highly complementary and can learn from each other. I hope the celebrated LEP will be transformed into the look each other policy and will be the basis of the friendship and trust between the two countries for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumagai. We will move this morning's program to the question and answer session. I would like to invite our moderator, Mr. Thomas Daniel, Senior Fellow of ISIS Malaysia, to moderate this session. Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Salima. And thank you very much to our two speakers, Yang Bahagia Tun and also Kumagai-san. We have about, I think, a short time till about 10:50 for our Q&A, so we will try and address a couple of questions. But first, I would be remiss if I did not turn over the floor to my boss, Herizal, who certainly has who has an intervention to make. Boss, the floor is yours. You are muted.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much, Thomas. So I have the first question to Tun Dr Mahathir. Like Tun rightly pointed out, when the Look East policy was launched, it was many years ago. I was actually in preschool then. And much has changed since then, not just the West, the world, as well as the East. I think for Malaysia and Southeast Asia, looking east now means looking at more than Japan. Indeed, Japan now must compete against China and South Korea when it comes to development, initiatives and models, especially in this region. Yang Bahagia Tun, you have often traveled and spoke to Japanese policy-making audiences. Looking at this current state of the region, what would your advice be to them when it comes to re-engaging with Malaysia and indeed targeting their independence? Thank you.
What was my... I couldn't make out the last one, the last part of your question.
Right. So essentially, Tun, because the East has changed as well, and today we feel that Japan must also compete against China and South Korea. What would your advice be to your Japanese counterpart on how they should re-engage with Malaysia, as well as Southeast Asia in general, so that we can have a greater relationship as well as a better vision moving forward?
Well, when we first look at Japan, that inspired us to look more closely at the countries of the East. So the Look East policy is not confined only to Japan, but also to South Korea and China, and even other entities in East Asia. We know we can learn a lot, but it's not everything that we should adopt from these countries. Some are not suitable for Malaysia, and therefore we discarded those. But those which are suitable for Malaysia, we take and we try to benefit from the ways of development that is seen in these countries. In particular, Japan. This is a country that went through a very disastrous war, and the whole country was devastated. I went there in 1961, and the Japanese were busy rebuilding their country. Such was their ability that within a short while, Japan became the second biggest economy in the world after the United States. So there must be something right about what Japan was doing, and we wanted to learn from Japan. So in order to do that, we have this Look East policy, and we send a lot of students and even workers to Japan to learn about the way the Japanese rebuilt their country. Malaysia was not destroyed much by the war, but still we need to rebuild our country. And we should try and emulate what is right about the way Japan recovers. They say you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So we see how Japan is doing, and we don't have to reinvent the way of developing the country. We need only to take as a model what was seen in Japan. And because of that, Malaysia very quickly was able to industrialize and give a better, was better developed than most other countries which were struggling to find their own way of developing their country. But of course, we don't depend upon copying what is done in Japan only. We need to see what is right and what is wrong about Japan, and we need to see also other countries. So the Look East policy has shortened the period of development of Malaysia because we don't have to do things on our own, but we can copy the models provided by Japan in particular. And everybody acknowledges that our decision to look east was the right decision because Malaysia became, which was a poor third world country, which was based, the economy was based on agriculture. It soon became industrialized, and today we are regarded as a middle income country. So looking at other people, learning from them is a shortcut to quick development of a country. After that comes innovation.
Okay, thank you very much, Tun, for your remarks. I have a question right now to Kumagai-san. Kumagai-san, there is a sense by some in Malaysia that the Japan-Malaysia relationship, it's a very long relationship, but it is one that some of us feel that is sometimes taken for granted because there is long-standing cooperation marked by the LEP. It has led to a sense of familiarity. Can I push you perhaps to address this concern? In your view, what are the aspects of the relationship that Japan might need to really look at re-engaging in, and what more can be done? Or do you perhaps feel that maybe from your peers in Japan that they look at the relationship at Malaysia as something very familiar, maybe too familiar, that perhaps we are not aware of the changes taking place in Malaysia and Southeast Asia in general? To you, Kumagai-san.
Okay. I think it's true that Japanese people takes the friendship with Malaysia taken for granted. Someone think that Tun Dr Mahathir is still the Prime Minister of Malaysia because he is very famous in Malaysia, and what Japanese people know most in for Malaysia is the name of Tun Dr Mahathir. So he likes Japan. So Japanese people think that Malaysia is always likes Japan. So I think that we need to rebuild this friendly relationship intentionally. Again,
because actually Japan-Malaysian relationship is not that exciting compared with 1990, because Japan is now in the lost decades, and Tun Dr Mahathir is actually not the prime minister already. So Japanese ordinary people's interest to Japan is a little bit smaller compared with 1990s. So I think we again each other consider both countries as essential partners, especially the world divided. We need to take a stand, US, China, Russia. So for Japan, the ASEAN countries are very important partners. And Malaysia is maybe one of the important within the ASEAN countries, because we have the history of the long, good relationship.
Yes, thank you very much, Kumagai-san. I'm going to take one of the questions from the Q&A tab, and I'm going to paraphrase. And this question is for Tun, for Tun Dr Mahathir. Tun, we have someone here from Lebanon, and the essence of his question is that he notes as part of your remarks the importance of incorporating Japanese work attitude, the moral values, the progressive norms, and the work ethic, and he wonders whether can we consider bringing in Islamic values that are compatible with this for countries such as Malaysia and Lebanon as we move forward? Is there a way to bridge the best of Japanese values and the best of Islamic values? Because keeping in mind that the ambassador also mentioned that one of the things that they look at in Malaysia in particular, and one of the particular areas of cooperation, is leveraging on the fact that Malaysia is a progressive Muslim country. Tun, I turn over the floor to you.
In the course of my visits to many countries, I noticed that some countries do well, some countries even fail. Why do some countries do well and others fail? The reason lies in their work ethics, in their value system. Obviously, if they are not inclined to work hard, they will not achieve much. But what I notice in Japan is that they work very hard. Even in cold weather, they would be out there working very hard, and therefore they succeed. The other thing about the Japanese value system is that they have a very strong sense of shame. They don't want to be ashamed of what they do. They want to be appreciated for what they do. So whenever they do anything, they want to produce the best they can so that they will not feel ashamed. In the old days, when they feel ashamed, they even commit suicide. But nowadays, of course, they don't do that. But they want to feel proud of their product. And because of that, they are very, very concerned about the quality of their products. So because they work hard and they concentrate on quality, the Japanese product soon set the standard for the whole world. And therefore they are readily accepted in the marketplace. So that is why Japan has succeeded. If we have the same work ethics, I think we too can succeed. I believe that people have the same ability, but it is the work ethics that determine whether they fail or they succeed. If they don't work, obviously they cannot succeed. So when we look at Japan, we notice that one character that has contributed to the Japanese success is their work ethics. So when we went to Japan and we thought that we should look east, we should look at their work ethics also, not just their industrial progress, but also their work ethics. And this is why we introduced the Look East policy, which is not about becoming Japan, but working like the Japanese.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yang Wagetun. I think we have time for one more question before we have to draw this to a close. And you know, we have a lot of questions to take. Yang Wagetun, I will address this question to you again. And this really builds on part of your remarks. I think after 40 years of looking, 40 years of having a Look East policy, including having a revitalized Look East policy when you were Prime Minister for the second time, I think building on that and looking at particular aspects in the relationship that the ambassador mentioned, things like green technology, dealing with climate, dealing with disaster management, and also dealing with an aging society. So these are all particular challenges for Malaysia right now. And I wondered, would you be able to share some of your thoughts on this, perhaps in a way of how Malaysian stakeholders can choose to move forward and to be proactive, because one of the challenges is that we tend to depend or expect the Japanese to always make the move, but sometimes we need to be very proactive and move forward. So Tun, I give this to you, sir.
When in answering the last question, I forgot that they were asking about whether Islamic values would help or not.
Yes, please.
Islamic values are as good as Japanese values, but unfortunately, most Muslims do not follow Islamic values. For example, Islam forbids killing, and yet they are killing each other. So if you don't follow Islamic values, you are not going to succeed. So that deals with that. With regard to the thing that Malaysia wishes to do, we want to become a developed country. But in order to do that, we must adopt the ways that and the values that can contribute towards our success. I mentioned just now the Japanese sense of shame. It is a very good value which make them produce things that are of good quality so that they will not be ashamed of their products. So this is again a question of values. Malaysia can change. We have in this country people of 3 different races. Their value systems are not the same. And you see a difference between the success of some race and the failure of other race. So what we should do is to try to synchronize and standardize the values that we have. And I'm quite sure that if we standardize the values of all the 3 communities with the values that can contribute towards their success, they will be able to develop Malaysia and to become a developed country. Unfortunately, they have been influenced by political affiliations. So they are more concerned about politics than development. So although in the initial stages we were doing quite well, we were actually progressing towards becoming a developed country, but politics have diverted the attention of most Malaysians so that they disregard economic needs and focus more on politics. Basically, it is on who will rule the country. So at this moment, Malaysia is not yet not able to make progress because we have been influenced by the wrong values that among the people in Malaysia.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yang Mohamad Tun. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have come to the end of the Q&A. But before we close this webinar, allow me to express my deepest gratitude to our two panelists, Yang Mohamad Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad, and also Mr. Satoru Kugamai-san for his for both of their for their remarks, for sharing their thoughts and their expertise with us. Before I turn over to my colleague Falina, I actually wondered whether His Excellency the Ambassador would have any intervention that he would like to make. If there isn't, that is okay. But if there is, we would certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very interesting interactions. I do not have anything much to add, but again, this is really important input to our discussion with Malaysian government on the new phase of request policy. And we're really looking forward to reflecting today's discussion to our way forward. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Mr. Harizal, anything to chip in before we bring this to a close?
No, thank you, Thomas. Just my deepest gratitude and thanks to my Japanese friends as well as counterpart, the ambassador and Mr. Kumagai Sturo, and definitely Tun. It was always a pleasure, and again, wonderful to hear your talks this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, before I hand over to Falina, allow me to thank all our participants. There are about 186 of you. Thank you very much for bearing with us. Our webinars, our forums would not be possible without your support and your attendance. So thank you very much for that. With that, Falina, I will pass it to you to bring us to a close.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you to our keynote speaker, Yang Amat Berbahagia Tun Dr Mahathir Mohamad, discussant Mr. Satoru Kumagai, and the moderator, Mr. Thomas Daniel, for the great discussion. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this brings an end to our program today. We are most grateful for your participation and lively engagement. This webinar is a part of a series to commemorate the Look-East policy. We look forward to your participation in the events down the line. If you could spare a moment, a short survey will pop up in a moment, and we'll be most grateful to have your feedback and insights on the session today. Additionally, we wish to invite all our participants to ISIS Malaysia's hallmark event, the Asia Pacific Roundtable, with the 35th iteration titled Sustaining Cooperation, a competition taking place from 5th to 7th July. The event page is accessible via QR code right after this session. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we have reached the end of our webinar. We thank you once again and look forward to meeting you in another session in the near future. Thank you and have a good day ahead.